where we're at, and it looks like the party has started. It's Friday afternoon. Hopefully you all have a joint in hand and a cocktail ready to go. It's coming on happy hour somewhere. My name is Zach Carson. I am the one of the curators and producers of the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium, and we want to welcome you to the last panel of the day today. It's been an incredible week with over 130 speakers, with over 45 panels, addressing a very holistic perspective in sustainability and how that relates to this emerging industry of cannabis. It's just been remarkable to hear the diversity of issues and challenges and solutions and successes that have stemmed across the entire country and even the world as it relates to social justice in cannabis and health and wellness and agriculture, energy efficiency, waste, business, really across the gamut. And I think it's a testament to the power of this plant and what it brings and how diverse of an impact it can really have. And not only that, the responsibility and opportunity we have to usher this plant into the world in a very responsible and new way. All of those topics have been covered. So it's been a thrill. This panel specifically, very excited to introduce it. Marketing cannabis sustainability. And the panel will be really describing how competitive marketing in cannabis has become and how quickly that has led to industry leaders and customer loyalty. On this panel, we're going to review some of the strategies that brands are using to authentically connect with consumers, and we're going to shed light into what we can expect from top brands in the future. We have a real all-star lineup on this panel, and we have Lisa Buffo from the Cannabis Marketing Association, Gagan Levy from We Are Guru, Zach Darling from Cannacraft, and Rue Johnson, who is actually the marketing director of this and the Cannabis Certification Council. An amazing crew, and I'm going to turn this over in a second to Gagan Levy, but first I just want to introduce him so he gets enough love here. So, a dear brother of mine, Gagan is the founder and chief creative director of an award-winning creative agency, We Are Guru, that serves as some of the world's most impactful, purpose-driven movements, brands, and organizations such as Patagonia, the World Bank, Obama '08, 1% for the Planet, the SIVA Foundation, NASA. Those are some of the agencies that his group works with. Gagan is also the co-chair of the Social Venture Circle, one of the most prestigious impact investor and social business communities, as well as sitting on the board of the Ram Dass Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. So Gagan and this team here, some of the best people in the marketing game and most influential in the cannabis industry. And going to turn it over to you. Just right before I do, attendees, if you do have questions, there is a Q&A button on the bottom. Please use that, and the moderator and panelists will get to that if they can. They will see it, and if they can, they'll get to it. So leave them there, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Gagan, and the rest of you, and we'll see you in about 45 minutes.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Feels good to be introduced by the mayor of the Sustainable Cannabis League here. Yeah, very excited for the panel that we have. We're going to be talking about marketing sustainable cannabis. Just to jump right in to kick it off, we were having a little chat a couple days ago, the four of us, about this panel. And I loved what Zach brought up. Zach Darling from Cannacraft. If you don't know Cannacraft, they're the fantastic cannabis brand that's brought, Farmer and the Felon and Care by Design and all kinds of amazing CBD and cannabis brands to us. But you brought up, that you even wanted to challenge the name of the panel before even jumping in. You're like, sustainable cannabis, what is that? It still feels aspirational. Can you just even, let's start there. Can you talk a little bit more about what you were referring to?
Sure. Thanks, Goggin. Yeah, I just think that the best place to start when you're addressing anything when it comes to sustainability is truly understanding and having a certain level of respect and reverence for the word itself. It's a deeply overused concept, an overused word. It's used for profit and greenwashing all too often, and really true sustainability is something that still has yet to be achieved, and especially in cannabis. I think with a lot of the regulations that we're all subject to, and all the different brands have to kind of adhere to through child-resistant packaging, which results in a lot of plastics or a lot of the waste material that goes into the cannabis products, or nutrients or regenerative soil practices, et cetera, and carbon footprint of transportation of packaging to the cannabis brands, and from the products to the dispensaries, et cetera. We are far from actual sustainability, and I just want to just take a minute and just say there is no such thing right now as sustainable cannabis. It is aspirational. It's something that we're all hoping to achieve at some point in the future, but we have a lot of work to do, and it's just really important that we have reverence for the concept and don't treat it lightly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because, there's a lot to learn from the natural products industry in general, and what they've done around certifications. We actually, our agency helped Patagonia and Bronner's and Rodale Institute and some of the others develop the regenerative organic certification, which is in the natural products industry, which is really bring together these ideas of regenerative soil health, organic, and fair trade. And then I'm sure a lot of you out there have heard about Sun and Earth, which we also worked on with Bronner's. I got my all one love cap here from Bronner's. But they really were looking to do that same kind of regenerative organic certification in the cannabis industry with this Sun and Earth certification, and even launched a brand, Brother David's, which it really is manifesting that. So it does feel there. It may be aspirational. It's even aspirational in natural products when we talk about this regenerative organic certification, very aspirational certification. So, it does feel aspirational still, but it seems like a North Star that we all have to be shooting towards.
Yes.
Right. And especially at the national level. So given that we've got Lisa here, who's the founder and director of the Cannabis Marketing Association, nationwide, I'd love to throw it over to you. How are we starting to define, sustainable overall? Like, what is the council's vision for that narrative at a national level?
Thank you, Goggin. So I think I'm not the best person to speak on behalf of the council, but I would say that I think sustainability is something we have to define. Obviously, zero waste versus carbon neutral. Are we talking sustainability as far as how cannabis is grown, and then also how the end product gets to the consumer? As we know, this space is very heavy in packaging, which we have to do because of the regulations. But end to end, I think there's really a lot to consider as far as sustainability, and that is something, through events like this that I think we're all trying to hash out and better define. And I think when it comes to marketing too, to me, one of the most important things when it comes to marketing is storytelling. Good marketing is in its best form, good storytelling. People often think it's just about colors or logo and design, and that's certainly an element of it, but it is about good storytelling. And I think, just to prime this conversation about marketing sustainable cannabis, we got to figure out what the story is about sustainability in order to start marketing it and conveying it. And I don't think we as an industry have really had that conversation because we're still in the steps of defining it. So I think, first step is defining sustainability. And then the second step is what is the story? Because there's so many different angles that can be taken here. Just as a little context, I think, for kicking it off today.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of, you know, I like to talk about the actually the sustainability before we jump to the storytelling, right? Because there's so many organizations out there we know that are greenwashing. And I know that word could be used in all kinds of great ways for our industry, but that are, you know, jumping right to the talking about it. I mean, they hire an agency or a PR agency, they get a nice sustainability statement on the front of their website, and all of a sudden they're marketing their products based on values alignment or sustainability, and it's hard for consumers to kind of navigate, which is part of the importance of having you know, certifications. So Rue, actually, I'd love to actually throw this over to you as well. You know, working with the Cannabis Certification Council, I mean, how are you feeling about, or how are you all looking at, you know, that difference, like how we kind of separate those that are actually walking their talk and those that are just, you know, greenwashing through certifications and other ways?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think in general, specifically with the council and other organizations and companies that I work with, it is all about that authenticity, and it's about the track record of the company and of the organization and of the people who are kind of creating this story and presenting it. So if you're someone who believes that sustainability is important, then that means that's going to show across your marketing, on your website, and of course the packaging and what it is that you're putting out. But it also kind of reminds me of when Zach brought up in sort of our prep call about like pushing back on the notion that sustainability is either unattainable or that it's something that we all can be participating in, it sort of reminds me of this social space that we're currently in our world, and the challenges and the obstacles that exist with actually walking the walk and with actually being authentic in the story that you're telling. And I think it's important to recognize that the first thing you have to do in any capacity of presenting to have some sort of mission being a part of your company is that you have to create a solid standard within that, and you have to have a track record of working in that direction in order for it to seem real. And I know that customers can feel that, and other people who, of course, would be a part of your organization or otherwise. A certification stamp is going to mean nothing if your company doesn't show this across the board. If your company doesn't make sustainability their main goal and talking about it in ways not that it's just sort of some nebulous goal, but giving very specific facts. This is how we support. This is how, you know, we handle regulations. This is how we prevent millennials from having to pay 73% more, and, you know, in sustainability and all of those things. It has to be embedded in the culture. And I think that for me also, again, makes me think about this social space that we're in. Like, for example, with the most recent uprisings, there were all these companies that all of a sudden had these like very catchy catchphrases about, you know, the social dynamics in the world, but they had nothing to back that up, and they had no plan to go forward. Sustainability is exactly that same point. It's not just a talking point. It's not just a certification cosign. It is specifically about creating a programmatic level that is attainable and can be measured in milestones.
Absolutely. Yeah, it feels it's ground up, right? It like this happens from the inside out. It's not. I actually read a book about 6 months ago by Anand Giridharadas called "Winners Take All," and he used this great metaphor, and he was talking about what's happening in the purpose space right now, and said it's kind of like when McDonald's put a salad on their menu, you know, 20 years ago. It's like most of the parts of the menu kept getting worse, kept getting bigger. The fries got bigger, the Coke got bigger, the meat got worse, but they would market the salad, right? They've got a salad, so they'd always be talking about that salad. So it's, you know, it's interesting. I see that happening in the cannabis industry a little bit as well. And then I see, you know, companies like CannaCraft, you know, really, I mean, owning this from the inside out, and starting with brands like, you know, Farmer and the Felon and Care by Design, and really looking at, you know, how these brands can bring some light to social issues, can help consumers be more in alignment with their values as they're consuming cannabis as well as other products. So actually, Zach, I'd just be curious to throw it over to you. I mean, maybe for folks on that aren't familiar with some of those brands or with Cannacraft's ethos, you could talk a little bit about how you all, have done that either as a master brand or as some of your sub brands that have really, been inspirational in the space.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to have a sustainable company, sustainable in the sense that it's going to stand the test of time and be one of the survivors in this massive shakedown that the cannabis industry is experiencing. I'm a personal believer that you have to be a purpose-driven and authentic brand. And ultimately, authenticity is the name of the game when it comes to sustainability. We as like any industry, we're in a consumer-driven economy, and the consumers and your audience and your customers like to embrace businesses that are authentic to their core. And I'm really proud that Cannacraft has done so on every one of our brands. I do with Farmer and the Felon, our initiatives to support the Last Prisoner Project. We've been the primary brand that has pushed forward the Last Prisoner Project. Last Prisoner Project is a phenomenal a nonprofit that focuses on release of nonviolent drug offenders, cannabis offenders that are doing unjust prison time. We've contributed significantly to them. I believe that sustainability and corporate social responsibility in many ways are one and the same. Ecological responsibility and social sustainability are really, we have to have a healthy population and healthy culture as well as a healthy planet. So there is no real dividing line between environmental and social initiatives, in my opinion, because it's just about global health and the health of humanity. A couple other things that are pretty noteworthy, that some that I don't think people even know about. Absolute Extracts, one of our extracts brands, our flagship extract brands, about a year ago, pushed through an initiative to have all of our vape carts. They used to always come in child-resistant packages. The vape carts themselves had to be in a child-resistant package. And Dennis Hunter, our founder, developed a cart that is inherently child-resistant, which got rid of tons of plastic packaging. If you were to stack up 1 year's worth of CR packaging, that child-resistant packaging for vape carts specifically, that would be about 916,000 feet tall, about 30 times taller than Mount Everest. And just in that one little change from the inside out, influencing the supply chain, we were able to do away with a tremendous amount of packaging. Also, we're working on, you mentioned Sun and Earth. Farmer and the Felon is doing a line in November with Sun and Earth farmers, and we're collaborating with Tree Hugger Containers, Tree Hugger Packaging, which is using ocean plastic lids and recycled glass. I think every cannabis brand should try to embrace the sustainable packaging options, or the recyclable, if we can go for compostable plastics. There are a number of emerging packaging partners out there that are becoming available that I'm a huge supporter of brands influencing the packaging companies to be able to continue to innovate. One of the other ones that we're really pushing behind, we are the premier sponsor of the Cannabis Voter Project. And as we know, we are weeks away from a monumental decision. So far, the Cannabis Voter Project has registered over 400,000 voters this year. And if you log on to cannabisvoter.info, you can check your voter registration, find your local polling place, declare yourself a cannabis voter, and see where your local representatives stand in cannabis. So those are just a handful of some of the current initiatives that we have going through Cannacraft. And I'm pretty proud to be part of such a purpose-driven organization.
That's beautiful. Thank you for laying that. I think it's important to really pull in some concrete examples. Yeah, I'm actually, it's interesting. I'm glad you did that plug on the voter project. I'm actually in my Sprinter with my family, traveling and getting voters out there trying to vote. Hence the Sprinter office here that you're joining me in. So so what you just talked about, you kind of talked about two sides of sustainability and purpose. There's, there's like how you deliver your product in the most conscious way possible. That's things like how you grow it, the packaging, how you take care of your supply chain, stuff like that. And then there's your give back strategy or your impact strategy. Sometimes those weave together, and sometimes they're separate, like Farmer and the Felon, for instance, and what you brought up. So, I always think when one of the things I've learned from the natural products industry, and when we are doing branding for organizations, we always start with purpose. What is the essence of why this was started? Not just to make money, but to increase joy and reduce suffering on this planet in some way. What is the purpose? And then brand based on that. I think the cannabis brands that are winning in the space have an authentic story there and are building from a foundation of purpose. Like I know Farmer and the Felon grew out of with Ned and Dennis. So Lisa, I'd be really curious, living in California, I feel like sometimes we're in a bubble. I know you're out in Denver, so you got the California, Colorado, connection at a national level. Is, who's kind of, are these things, are they starting to seep up to a national conversation to influence what's happening, in other states? Is California leading the way? Is Colorado? Are more people leaning into kind of the, how the product is delivered consciously, or more people leaning into the impact initiatives? I mean, you can take any of that. I'm just really curious at a national level, kind of what's happening.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I think at a national level where we're still a bit at this conversation of, is this a drug? Is this good or bad? I mean, we're still very basic in that sense. And I am currently in Denver, but I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio. So, a lot of my hometown and network is Ohio based, and I get very basic questions from them. Can you get lung cancer from smoking cannabis? I mean, things that to some of us in the industry would be like, this is very 101. They're not even at the production or industry side of things yet. So, there is something to be said for the culture, depending on where you are in this country and in this world, is at a very different place. But if I were to give an overall snapshot of where things are nationally, I think we're still at the destigmatization level. We're still working at breaking down those beliefs, which, in fairness, 80 years of prohibition and propaganda is going to do that to multiple generations of people. And I do think we need to, as an industry, really wrap our heads around, what is that conversation around destigmatization, and what's the story about this plant, in order for the sustainability aspect to be woven into it thoughtfully, and in a way that continues to establish and build trust with consumers. I do feel like, particularly for the Canna Curious and those new consumers, brands, industry, we've got a window to build that trust and establish that relationship with that person. And so we've got to be thoughtful about what that conversation is. And then when we start talking about sustainability, whether we're bringing it up or they're bringing it up, that we've really thought that through and are speaking from that authentic and really honest place.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that at a national, I mean, I completely agree with you. This is a behavior change moment, around cannabis. It's kind of like, when I'm if I would pull out a cigarette right now and start smoking it, everyone would be like, what the hell's going on? If I did that 20 years ago, wouldn't be a big deal. So there was a whole behavior change, a national marketing campaign and behavior change campaign underlying the core issue, which was health, but to move us from from smoking cigarettes in the traditional way we've known to maybe being more conscious about that. And you can point at lots of different kind of behavior change movements. It's interesting to see this one emerging. I mean, I'm seeing it personally, even with like my parents who were hippies, and graduated high school in '69, and we're stoners and smoking weed. My dad becomes an attorney, and all of a sudden, he's upset with my brother and I for smoking weed through high school and college, because at a national level, it's illegal. It's been, and it's been stigmatized in the way that you said. So now we're in this fight to not only look at how it doesn't do the harm that it's been stigmatized with, but how it actually has benefits, right? Like it's a medicinal plant. It's a beautiful plant that has a lot of healing at a number of levels for our society. So, yeah, thank you for that. And I'm curious now, like I'd love to zoom back in. That's going to a national level, what we need to do. And Rue, I know that, you're been working at the national level, but you're also working in the community level, and how we can make difference in the community at the local level. So maybe we could zoom back in, and you could talk a little bit about any community initiatives or what you think we need to be doing at more of the kind of hyper local level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Lisa brought up a really good point in terms of nationally the conversation about destigmatization and how that needs to sort of begin at a community level. And I think that's because we have these kinds of conversations every day, and we use the jargon, and we know the websites, and we do all these various things. But on a community level, it's still very much like having conversations with your family about smoking or consuming cannabis and what that means, whether we're using the terms cannabis or if we're using marijuana, what the difference is between legalization and decriminalization. And I think these are conversations that the community is having. And by community, I mean people who are a part of, consumers who are not operators or who are not cultivators or who don't work in any of the ancillary industries. And I feel like the conversation about sustainability and how to brand and how people perceive your brand, it all goes back to those ideas of authenticity. Consumers and community are buying from brands that they feel safe with and that they feel aligned with their values and who care about the environment. And I saw one question in the chat, which I thought was really interesting. It was asked essentially, are brands or should brands be responsible for the life cycle of their product? And I do think we're finding much more conversation that's happening with brands who do take a bigger and greater responsibility for how we use their products and what kind of, packaging it comes in and what do you do with this when it's done? And if there's a message on it that says, please recycle this or do with it, or you can reuse it in this kind of way. Those are the things that consumers care about, because that's what consumers and community are spending their money on. Just like when, the news hits, and outside of my cannabis work, I also work in the music industry, right? So figuring out how people consume media about the things that they care about is the beginning of any formula for building a community around sustainability or otherwise. So you find out what community wants by talking with them, and you find out what community wants by studying how they move in certain arenas. So we do know that climate change is of the most important, particularly for millennials and others who are of this age and work in the industry. So we have to pay attention to the kind of language that's being used by community, and also seeing how we all are spending our dollars, how we're using our voices, and how we align our vision and values with other organizations and politically as well. I think that is going to be becoming a greater and greater part of the conversation, what we do with our politics, what we do with our vote, what we do with those who align themselves with our similar values. That's all going to trickle down to the cannabis industry. So I think it's really important that we begin to listen to community and to use the language of community to combat some of the biggest issues, which do include destigmatization and also carries right over to the life cycle product that we're putting out.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah. Yeah. In the natural products industry, we've been working on a large coalition called the Climate Collaborative. It's over 600 natural products brands now that are aligned in these commitments of climate action they can take, looking at the whole life cycle of the product. And I was so excited to see some cannabis brands joining. There's Mosaic, Soma Rosa Farms, one of my favorite farms, actually created by Ned, who is the founder of CannaCraft. You know, where they're forming this cannabis collaborative as well to make some of these commitments and really hold each other accountable. And you know, and then it's up to all of us to be educating consumers as well on this, right? Because it's all there's so much coming at consumers. Like there's so many. We've covered a bunch of it here, and to get educated on each of these initiatives, I think it's really important for these coalitions to kind of come together and align on a narrative and messaging, and potentially even editorial calendars where it's like, you know, for the next 3 months, we're going to talk about packaging. We're going to educate consumers about packaging, and try to move them so that they are the ones that are putting pressure on the rest of the brands to continue to evolve at a, you know, from a sustainable standpoint. So to that point, I'm curious. I talked a little bit about company ethos, and then talked a little bit just now about, you know, consumers driving change. I want to throw it out there to the group, and maybe starting with you, Zach. Which is driving sustainability in this industry? Is it company ethos? Is it consumer demand?
You know, unfortunately, at this point, I don't think that we have the data in which that is trackable. I would love to encourage Headset and BDS Analytics and New West New Frontier Data to actually integrate some sort of a tracking system in all the data and analysis platforms that can actually follow brands that do use CSR and sustainability practices, to where we can actually see what kind of a lift we see in cannabis specifically. Because right now it's just based on gut instinct and feeling, and a true belief that when you do want to authentically connect with your target consumers, you want to resonate with them on the same frequency. And if you want to speak to people where sustainability and CSR and social justice are important to them, then you create a brand that resonates on that same frequency. So we've seen it with Farmer and the Felon. Farmer and the Felon is a relatively new flower brand out on the market, and you know, the demand has been a pretty strong force for us to reckon with. The amount of demand that we've had for the Farmer and the Felon brand, the amount of dispensaries that are asking for it, the quickness in which our products are just flying off the shelves. You know, a lot of that does have to do with the authenticity and the quality of the product, but so many people resonate with the fact that this is a flower brand that is very specifically working on corporate social responsibility, social justice, and specifically Last Prisoner Project. So if we were to see Last Prisoner Project actually getting support through love and support from the consumers, Farmer and the Felon is the best example that I can really show of it.
I also want to just jump in on that as well, is to say that because someone mentioned it about people of color specifically, I'm gonna actually scroll up and say what he said, because I think it's important. The impact of colonization is huge and affects other people of color too, and if and how we use cannabis and our involvement within the industry. I think that's important, because it's the conversation about the times right now. You know, we cannot, if there are not plans to incorporate and include people of color in the marketing on any aspect of the use of the plant, then people will notice that. And you know, this wouldn't be a part of the conversation even 5 or 10 years ago. You know, people were very satisfied with just letting the cannabis industry look how it looked, and those who were really affected and impacted by the war on drugs looking how they look, right? It's very important that we recognize that there's tons of organizations like the Minority Cannabis Business Association that are led and run by people of color, that should be actively supported, just like other organizations that are white-led. And I think in order for us to make any kind of movements within the industry, it has to focus on the margins first. And I think community knows that across all levels. If you want to talk about recycling or sustainability or any aspect of the cannabis industry, if you're not focusing on the margins, then it does nothing but lead to problems that we won't even be here to fix. So I just wanted to note that in addition to Last Prisoner Project and some of the others that you've mentioned that Zach is affiliated with, it's very important that we amplify the voices of people of color across all aspects of the industry. Otherwise, these conversations about sustainability will really not matter in the long run, and that is where community is coming from.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah. Again, just because I like to pull from industries that are a little more mature than ours to see where ours is going, to pull from the natural products industry. I mean, this awakening that's happened over this past summer. There's an organization called JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, JEDI Collaborative. What it's trying to do is bring justice, equity, diversity, inclusion into the natural products industry, not just from an HR perspective, but also from a stakeholder perspective. For instance, if we are not marketing healthy natural products to underserved communities or communities of color, then they're not going to buy them. And then they don't buy them, and then it's reinforced to the natural products company. They don't buy their product, so they don't educate through marketing around some of these sustainability topics, health topics, things that we're talking about here. And it's pervaded the natural products industry for years. So it's a systemic shift that needs to happen within that industry. There's also a shift that needs to happen for individual leaders around this, and a shift at the business level. So I'd actually ask you, Rue, would you mind just talking a little bit more about what the Minority Cannabis Business Association does? Because you went over it quick, and I want to make sure that people really understand.
Sure. So MCBA, and I'm on the board of directors at that organization. So MCBA is essentially an organization that's designed to give resources to new people of color within the cannabis space, and to provide webinars and education, as well as creating and writing political model ordinances across the country for legislation. And we specifically do that through the lens of social equity. And that's because there needs to be an organization that focuses on the margins specifically, and is not done necessarily as like an afterthought. If we're going to create corporate social responsibility, and if we're going to talk about corporate social responsibility, it cannot be done from the perspective of like, well, we're corporate socially responsible when it comes to our packaging, or we're corporate and socially responsible as it comes to the way that we put out our message. But if these companies don't reflect the real and true elements of community, meaning down to like who you hire and who is a part of the political conversation, MCBA is an organization that really brings up leaders within that lens of social equity who can talk about it across all spectrums. And so I brought that up because I think that sometimes it's easy for us to really think that we're doing a great job in our like sphere and bubble. We're talking about sustainability, and so we are focusing on how to make the environment and the climate and the earth, work better with us and in tandem with us. But we tend to sort of forget that in other elements of sometimes our business or our language or the way that we come across in the cannabis industry. I think people sort of tend to forget who was impacted the most by the war on drugs and what that means across the industry. And so people like Wanda James, like when I go to these kind of panels, or I'm like on these panels, or, I'm asked to be a part of something, or I'm listening to these webinars, and I've been in situations and places where Wanda has like very specifically brought it up. Like, let's not forget who was greatly impacted by the war on drugs and what that means for their ability to even be sustainable, or to be sustainable as a business, and then in all other aspects of that. So, if people want to check out MCBA, I put the link in the chat, but I just really wanted to make sure we're driving that home as we're talking about the ways that companies are doing this.
That's right. Yeah. That word sustainability has been co-opted into just environmental. in a lot of ways, but sustainability is reflecting to people as well. I like to talk about is, you know, how do we create triple bottom line businesses that don't just care about the bottom line, but they care about, in addition to profit, people and planet. And I think in any industry, especially, you know, what's happened in cannabis with a flood of money coming in and massive multi-state operators and whatnot, there's pressure all of a sudden from shareholders, right, to increase that profit without looking as much at people and planet. It's kind of, it's skipped over. But there's an opportunity right now to shift from a shareholder model to a stakeholder first model, to prioritize stakeholders within the system. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so I mean, this is great conversation. Lisa, I want to just throw it back to you to just hear, like, I mean, given all of this, this is such great landscape we're covering. Like, how do we rebrand cannabis going forward at the national level?
Thank you. This is one of my favorite questions. So I think two of the points I want to reinforce that have come up is authenticity is the name of the game, which Zach said earlier, and that I firmly, firmly believe storytelling is everything. And the two examples I want to look at when it comes to storytelling is, well, first CBD, close cousin to cannabis as we are defining it here. The 2014 documentary that came out with Sanjay Gupta changed the world's view on CBD. And that was a story about a girl and a patient and what she went through. And I think all of us have seen that. Our friends and family have seen it. It turned into a 3-part series. But sharing her story as a patient changed how we view CBD and how this product impacted a human being. And that was from the patient perspective, of which is one in cannabis. But there's so many different stories around cannabis, right? It's adult use, it's fun, it's a medicinal product. There's this massive spectrum of wellness in between. And I just want to reinforce that our individual stories absolutely matter. And the stories we have absolutely matter. And I know that the stories I have with my family in Ohio have changed so much for them and other folks in my life who have been, you know, either totally against this or on the fringe of it. So I think, you know, first step is we as individuals, and particularly all of us who work in the industry, have a responsibility to share our own stories with the people in our lives who are asking or who deserve to hear this information. So storytelling, absolutely want to reinforce that. And I think, you know, also looking at the LGBTQIA movement and what happened in the 90s, there's this whole coming, you know, we talk about the canna closet. When once you know someone who's a consumer, once you know someone whose life has been impacted by this, it is so much harder to shut a door on it and make judgments on it. So really want to kind of drive that storytelling aspect home, which it starts with the individual and the change you can make in your life, in your circle. And then as the industry, we can scale that up to the brand level. And I think brands, I've met so many amazing founders who have amazing stories, and they started businesses because of their own personal story or their own desire to increase access to cannabis because of someone else in their life who has been impacted. And I think those stories, frankly, in my personal point of view, don't come through enough on that brand level. They focus so much on the product and quality, which is absolutely necessary, and there's a space for that. But I think the why these brands started and why they launched, particularly those with these amazing founder stories, it's really important to get those out there because it resonates with consumers. And I know I make personal decisions in purchasing, both in the cannabis industry and outside, based on who runs and owns that company and what their story is, regardless of the message, the package, and the logo. So I think, you know, it's a complex and diverse question, but I would say step one is owning our stories. Step two is having that ownership at that brand level and making sure our business owners are communicating that with their employees and their teams, because that story can't go beyond the inner circle if the team doesn't know, as well. And then I think we do need to educate ourselves on what the opposition is saying and be able to answer those tough questions when we do get asked them, by people in our lives who have that kind of drug era tape playing in their head, if you will. So yeah, starting with busting stigma, but we got to do it by owning our stories.
Yeah, you're spot on. I could not agree more. It's, you know, crystallizing the purpose, from the inside out, developing then an ethos and commitments around how you develop your product, being able to then authentically talk about that through storytelling and bring that narrative to your consumers through, you know, multiple touch points, right? And one of those touch points that's most important is your employees, and how, again, from the inside out, how do you get stakeholder alignment around that purpose-driven narrative, so that you then, and with consistency, can bring that to your bud tenders and to other folks out there, because that's really, at the end of the day, you know, who's going to help educate the more conscious consumers out there. I love that. Love what you shared. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, we also, to that point, and to follow up to everything Rue has said, in addition to owning our stories, we need to be conscious of the stories that aren't being told, because we know ours in our head like it's second nature, but
Right.
it's like history. Which story is not being told here? And that is relevant in marketing, it's relevant in our brands, and it's relevant to destigmatization. Is I know my story as Lisa and a white woman, but I need to be aware of which stories I'm not hearing and seek those out and lift those up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, back in '08, we worked with MoveOn.org on the Obama campaign. We specifically worked on how we could get young minority voters out in the swing states, and we really leveraged storytelling, you know, from the source, like from the folks there in community, but also brought in music, and cultural icons, and you know, other ways to kind of help build some trust and infuse that influence into that cultural narrative. And Rue, I don't want to leave the panel without kind of tagging you on this, because I know you've got like a really rich background in the music industry. I mean, so how do we bring in, you know, musicians and other influencers into this narrative that that Lisa's talking about?
Well, I love the way that story and authenticity really do become the formula. And I think that musicians, the way that you bring them into this conversation is by hitting them at those very points, you know, so why they do what they do and how what they do impacts community. And so specifically, it wasn't necessarily around a cannabis initiative, but we found in some of our research that live music was not cost accessible to many people who really deserve to see some of these really great musicians. And so what we were able to do was pair the story of those who really needed these resources, pair that with how the musicians have been a part of that story, and then created something which then later turned into a big community program that allowed for there to be more cost accessible options as it relates to that. And musicians go for it, you know, they definitely understand the importance of how it relates to them economically. I mean, I live in Denver as well, like Lisa, and what the music industry was able to receive from the cannabis community as far as, you know, American dollars, it was like off the charts when cannabis went legal in Denver. I mean, it really just changed the game. And so while part of it is bringing that story and that authenticity to them, which allows them to connect more with community, they also care because they have, you know, money in their pocket. And as it's been a part of the greater conversation about national politics, many artists have been involved because they now see that the way, you know, democracy looks for them could look very different if they didn't have that involvement. So I think that, you know, capturing the story, but then also letting artists see what's in it for them. And because cannabis has been, you know, right there, brother and sister with the music industry for so long, it really allows for artists to feel like they can be heard. And also, I mean, again, I live in Denver, so I don't know what's it's like in, you know, Boston, but people are smoking weed at concerts. So they, you know, they want to like experience that, and they care about what that environment looks like and what that culture brings as well.
Yeah. Well, if they aren't, be a lot cooler if they did. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on just some of the limitations and challenges that brands might run up against in regards to being able to market their sustainability and their CSR programs. You know, one of which I would say one of the biggest things that's a hurdle is the inability for cannabis brands to be able to use the term organic. That's a regulation that it slaps pretty hard on a lot of us, and no matter how sustainable farming practices and bioregenerative you know, practices they put into their farms, they can't use that term. And you've got entities like BioVeganic and EnviroCan, which is creating EnviroGanic, and coming up with other terms that they can try to create as new standards, Sun and Earth being probably the flagship of a lot of those. But we're having to kind of, as marketers and innovators, we're having to create our own new language of what those kind of standards of sustainability are. And my hat's off to the innovators and the nonprofits and the certification programs that are creating that kind of new language for us to be able to utilize to promote the fact and market the fact that we are using natural practices. I think also there's cause marketing laws in California and how you can or can't make donations to various nonprofits, and there's plenty of small brands out there that just do it anyway and can get away with it. But you know, CannaCraft is is a large, you know, flagship brand in California. The spotlight's on us, and we have to be very careful as to how we make those donations. You know, there's plenty of innovative ways in which we're obviously able to make major support towards the nonprofits that we're a part of. But the cannabis industry is unfairly handicapped with what it can actually put out there as far as its contributions. And I feel like that's a place when it comes to public policy, those are two areas that I think need a lot of attention.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And it's important that we don't, you know, fight with toothpicks over here, and not get aligned and moving these larger movements forward, right? That can happen in progressive movements quite a bit, unfortunately. You know, we get caught up in wordsmithing and other things while we miss sometimes large opportunities to push these movements forward. So 2 minutes left. Love to just kind of give each of you, you know, 30 seconds, 45 seconds on the way out, just to share any last thoughts you'd like to. Zach, since you're off, why don't you just start us out?
Sure. I just, you know, I love to call out organizations that I think that are doing great work. And there was a question earlier in this panel from Aaliyah asking about various entities in regards to packaging and supply chain. And I just went through and posted about a dozen links there. So if you haven't checked out the chat for this panel, please check it out. There's a lot of really great organizations that are worthy of your attention. And I just want to thank Ben and Zach and Gagan and Tim and everybody for organizing, and Rue for organizing this really amazing conference. And it's hard to go digital, but really community is super vital, as we talked about before. And you know, it's people like this that are stepping up, that are still rallying the community through this type of digital format to where we can stay connected and share ideas. So a lot of gratitude for everybody.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing all those links. I saw those popping in the chat. Throwing it over to you, Lisa. Last words.
Thank you to everybody as well. If you're in the marketing space, check us out, thecannabismarketingassociation.com. Love chatting marketing and branding with anybody, and figuring out how we can, you know, move the needle on the greater industry conversation. So check us out there.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Rue?
Thank you so much. I also really want to shout out everyone on this panel for a really great conversation, and Gagan especially for all the prep and everything you had to do to get us across the finish line. Thank you, Zach, Carson, especially for pulling this all the way together. And I guess my final shout out is especially to Lily K. from Green Bee Botanicals, who was really instrumental in getting me some great statistics on sustainability. And Green Bee is my favorite company right now, and they're doing it right and natural and clean. And yeah, I hope you all check that out. So thank you so much for a really great day.
Beautiful. And maybe someone could copy paste the chat, because we'll make sure that all those links get out to you all who are curious about it. I'm Gagan from, you can check us out at weareguru.com, branding and creative agency for good. And so nice to be with you all today. Thanks for the community, and lots of gratitude to everyone on the symposium. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Such amazing information you shared. These are definitely some of the best minds in marketing in general, in my mind, but also as it relates to cannabis, and how we go to market and how we communicate the value proposition of our brands and of this flower and of this movement is so critical into building a really just and profitable and beneficial industry. Zach, Rue, Gagan, love you guys. Lisa, so excited to get to know you more. For all of you who have attended, this has been wonderful.